I'm Andrew Sherman. I'm a Texas transplant who has always been in pursuit of art as a career. I've played in bands, pursued an acting career in Hollywood, but I found it behind the lens of a camera here in Dallas, Texas. I was born in New York, I've lived in Chicago, Los Angeles, Austin, but I love Dallas. There's a magical artistic scene in Dallas that mostly goes unnoticed to the outside world. This podcast is focused on what makes it so special and the people who make it thrive artistically. If you don't live here, and even if you do, you might not have heard of them. This is the Dallas Famous Podcast.
So who you gonna be? Who you gonna be when you're all grown up? Who you gonna be? Who you gonna be when you're all for us? Yeah.
This week on the Dallas Famous Podcast, it's musician and composer Poppy Xander. Poppy has been playing piano since she was young and has really made her mark on the Dallas music scene. She's a founding member of Helium Queens, where she received a grant from the city of Dallas to write and perform a space opera. This led to Poppy joining the Polyphonic Spree. Xander has also played in a few big local tributes, like Madonna, George Strait, and the Smiths. She's as charming as she is talented, and this chat gets pretty in-depth. Here's Poppy Xander. And we are here with Poppy Xander, musician, keyboard player, composer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. All the above.
Uh-huh.
So I did my research. So you're from Texas?
Yes.
Wait, actually, I don't know what city in Texas.
I was born in Lubbock.
Okay.
And then my parents moved to North Texas and just kind of grew up in the suburbs. I don't say this a lot, but I grew up in the Colony. I mostly don't say it because it's called the Colony, but now I really don't say it because people are like, oh, you're bougie. And I'm like, well, when I was a child, there was nothing out there at all. It was 121 was like one lane going one way, the other going the other, and halfway between where, like, the main street where I lived and the Highway 35, there was one creepy swinging, like, not even a stoplight. It was just like a swinging light. And that's how you knew you were halfway to being home. So yeah, there was nothing out there when I was a kid.
Right.
It was very much just like playing and doing whatever we wanted to do and growing up in parks on bikes and yeah. With a bunch of churches and liquor stores. Fun
Stuff. So I guess, I mean, well then what kind of music were you getting exposed to early on?
So I had I feel really, really fortunate. My dad is not a musician, but he was a big music lover. He grew up in the UK, in Ireland actually, and was really into rock and roll and like their pirate radio kind of situations that they had out there. And again, wasn't a musician, wasn't ever trained, and brought that, back with him, and still is, always handing me CDs. A couple days ago, he goes, yeah, I have something I want to listen to with you. I bought a CD that we can listen to together. And I was like, oh, did you hear PJ Harvey just released a new album? And he was like, oh, that's what it was. I was waiting to listen to it so that we could listen to it together. I was like, I'll listen to it again. I was like, you listen to it on your own, and then we can listen to it together. So, yeah, very fortunate. My mom doesn't listen to music at all. And then as far as getting into playing, I had a neighbor, I was probably in second or third grade, and I used to let her dogs out. She had two little Cocker Spaniels, and she had a piano in her house, and I would just sit and pretend to play it probably. And then I would go to my grandmother's, who lived in Florida, and she would write out letters, and she told me what the letters were. So she would write out these pieces of music with just melodies on them. And I must have been pretty little at that time, probably before second grade. But yeah, and eventually I just did it, and somebody in the little church we grew up gave a piano to the family because I wanted to play, and I think my parents paid a little bit of money for it, and it lived in my room, and I was totally obsessed with it.
Wow.
Like, in my brain, like, I contorted it to be like a thing that was a life and death situation if I didn't practice, and was really good at like putting pressure on myself to make sure that like I did this thing. It's pretty wild, like all of the anywhere from that to like, trying to like build little worlds of things. It was very, and I think an internal experience.
You weren't playing for other people at that point. You're just kind of doing it on your own.
Well, in my mind, I was playing so that my parents could like afford their rent. Like maybe our landlord would like hear me playing and like somehow like have mercy upon them. I don't know if I was just like the most self-righteous child on the planet.
Sweet,
like
though.
I was, yeah, it's kind of sweet, but yeah, it's it's kind of interesting. So there's a lot of psychology
I feel
there.
like there's like Disney movie influence somehow in that, like
Yeah.
like if I just play hard enough.
Yeah, totally.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's really cute.
It was
Okay,
all that,
yeah.
So,
Okay, but so
yeah.
then at what point did you start, or either you or someone else go, oh, you know what? You're actually good at this. This isn't just a hobby. Like this is something that's like legit.
I bounced around piano teachers a lot when I was a kid because I think financial reasons and just like having the availability of somebody to actually take you consistently to a thing. And, a lot of piano teachers in my neighborhood were, I would say, pretty conservative, like people, ladies that didn't really have, they were stay-at-home moms and they taught piano on the side for money, and those were like really terrible experiences. And then at one point I got a really amazing piano teacher, although not consistent, and that really boosted my ability to read music and play. And then all of a sudden all that went away. And just because, again, of availability. And so that's when I started doing a lot of like improvising and just making stuff up at the piano, because I didn't really have anything else to do, and trying to write music out on sheet paper and stuff like that. And I remember running into the living room, my brother be playing Final Fantasy whatever number, and I'd be like, I just made this song up and I'm going to go make up more songs. That's my 6th grade voice probably.
Right.
And I would do that, and I don't know, I think he always thought that was kind of, he wasn't really like encouraging, but he always heard me practicing. He was the other kid that was home, the other person that was home, because there weren't really any adults home. My mom was always working. My dad didn't live with us. So yeah, it was, I think like I started realizing I could kind of, like I said, it was this internal experience always. So it really meant something to me in a way that I don't think anyone else could ever understand. And so it was never like I'm actually good at this. It was just kind of this connection to a thing,
Huh.
I started doing competitive piano in high school, late middle school, high school, and wasn't prepped well for that, like didn't really have the infrastructure for that, but did it anyway, and put a lot of pressure on myself to do that too, because my parents they weren't worried about any of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
That was all self-motivated, I guess. But yeah, and then I remember one day I was blow drying my hair, and I had a Tom Petty CD playing. I mean, I don't know how old I was, maybe it was like 13 or something like that, and Free Fallin' was on, right? And I was blow drying my hair, and I could hear the bass line, and that was like the first time that I'd ever like heard an instrument where I was like, oh, I think I can find what that note is. Because before, up until then, it had always just been sheet music, classical,
Sure.
coming from that angle. So slowly but surely, and it took a really, really long time to start to like line up those dots, connect those dots. Was I able to start playing in bands and stuff like that? And I never understood for a very long time how that was all supposed to fit together. I didn't understand how how musicians did what they did, like rock and roll.
How to play together.
Play together, or just, yeah. I didn't understand any of that stuff, even though I knew theory and could do a theory placement test and understand how harmony worked, because nobody talked like that either. So you start talking to guitar players, and they're not like, talking about functional harmony. And so
Right.
I have all this knowledge, and it's very specific and labeled, and they have all that knowledge, and there's a huge communication language barrier, and I feel insecure around that. So I just it took a long time because I didn't want to ask questions and stuff like that. You
Sure,
know?
sure.
So yeah, so this was a long process of getting into rock,
Right.
into the rock world.
Well, so then you go to UNT for music, is that right?
Yeah.
And you were doing that to be a musician or to be a teacher? Because I know you taught as well.
I wanted to save the world by teaching elementary music. I was thinking about going into music therapy, and I went into music education. I'd been playing in bands before that, so by that time I was pretty...
In high school, you're already playing in bands.
Yeah. I met somebody who I was telling them about how I was a classical piano player, and they were like, well... This is aside from figuring out how to play like Stairway to Heaven and Red Hot Chili Peppers song. What is it?
Under the Bridge.
Under the Bridge.
Yeah.
With my buddy, you know, one of my best buddies at the time. You know, like we figured those two songs out. You know, but besides that, I'd met a person and they were like, I was telling them about my classical music playing, and they were like, well, we play in this metal band, it'd be really cool for you to maybe try and combine those things, you know, because that was a thing at that time, you know, when the black metal scene and symphonic metal was kind of putting this like these big keyboard interludes and stuff into this music. So I started doing that and quickly was out of my league into how to ingrain those two, but that's kind of where that started.
Okay. So that's okay. So you're like you knew there was a way, but you hadn't figured out how to do it yet. Okay.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where that was the first like time where I was playing music, and it was in a band setting, and it was pretty intense because I feel like, and that's like kind of like a theme in my life is like I'm like, okay, I know it can be done, but I don't know how to do it, and I'm probably not going to ask about it, so I'm just going to fucking sit here and suffer through this shit until I finally figure it out or quit and start another band and then figure it out there, you know, right. Or like whatever. It's like, you know, slowly, you know, just stubbornly,
by fire, basically.
Just chomping away at the... You know.
But I mean, it's interesting because it's like you always had that instinct to not just play alone, obviously, because you could have done that piano. You don't need anyone else to you could be self-enclosed in that if you wanted. But it's just interesting, like you always had that instinct to like go further with it, you know, like to play with people.
I think that's the weird thing about piano. It's like it sets you up to be alone, and it is actually pretty unnatural to be doing that much music making alone.
Right.
So yeah, definitely gives you kind of like a weird experience because it's like you're not used to playing with other people, so timing is weird, and you know there's like a leniency to not playing in an ensemble. And growing up, I play clarinet in band. Well, half of what you do in band growing up is count to a metronome, you know, which I'm not going to comment on how weird that is, as you know, as a way of introducing children to music, but you know,
right.
It's another podcast, but yeah, so there's definitely, you know, pros and cons to how piano is approached, but
sure.
Yeah, definitely, you know, the influence of rock music in our house, I think definitely made me like want to try and
got it.
Like move into that world.
Yeah, because I think anytime you're introduced to music with lessons, you're learning like classical stuff first. I feel like almost any genre, like, you know, or any instrument. I mean, that's where they're starting you. So, but I mean, maybe I'm going out of order, but like you there was something about chamber music specifically that you got into.
I was talking about symphonic black metal. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're
I don't know.
Referencing
I'm
chamber
saying,
music
in
my bands?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it seems like it's a theme that you like because there's...
Yeah. Oh, so I had... I can't even remember the name of my own... What I called my band. Yeah, I really can't. I don't know if I wrote it. Is it somewhere? You know, because we would, you know, it was one of those things. It's like Poppy Xander and what do you say? It's just, you know, this music, the chamber rock the chamber rock ensemble, chamber rock orchestra. I don't know. I tried a few different things, you know. And yeah, the chamber rock idea was, you know, I had a desire to, well, really early into me playing solo. So this would have been after UNT, after I taught public school for 4 years, elementary music in Dallas, and then fucking quit. And after becoming an alcoholic, to be frank, because that shit is intense.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm sure
it's
any
really
better now. Jeez.
I can't even imagine what, I mean, I think that now I would have a lot more patience and like understanding to contribute in a healthier way to that. But at that time, it's just like, I mean, I was teaching 700 kids a week, you know, and it was, and no support and 45 kids in a classroom. And it was, you know, it was wild. But, so after that, is when I started doing my solo writing, and I started writing songs, not just improvising pieces of music and writing instrumental music.
And writing parts out for everybody, or just yourself? Or?
Nope, just myself.
Okay.
And I still do that. I still do not write parts out for other people. It's very rare that I tell somebody something that I want them to play, like, overly specifically. You know, I'll say, like, I might suggest some directions and things. Every once in a while, I'll get hooked on an idea and be like, I want this thing. But for the most part, I let people do what they do, because I don't have a lot of that. I don't know. To me, it's not the point. You know, I do what I do.
Oh, I get
like,
it. When I used to play, I did the same. Because my thing was I can't pay anybody at the time, so I was like, well, you have fun. You know?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. I read some Bob Dylan thing at some point that he didn't have a band because he couldn't pay him, and so I really tried to avoid having a band if I couldn't pay people.
Yeah, I get it.
And so that was kind of my, kind of has been my model. Although it's, you know, it's always hard to get paid. But yeah, in 2013, I think I was playing this like little coffee shop gig, and my friends said they were coming and that they were going to bring a violin player, and I didn't think anything of it. And then all of a sudden this tiny person appeared on stage next to me and was like, hey, and I was like, hi. She's like, can I play with you? And I was like, yeah. I'm pretty sure that's like all that was said. And she just started playing with me, and that was Charlotte Franklin. And so pretty much from then on, we've been in bands together. But that's the chamber rock ensemble was kind of like, you know, and then I had a friend who was a tuba player, and so I was like, well, come be basically my bass player. And then so that was Jeff Murder, and then Chelsea Danielle, I'd seen her play, and she's a band background, classical background, percussion, and, you know, drum kit, and, you know, marimba vibes, all that stuff. And so she started playing with me, and that's kind of how we formed that ensemble. And yeah, I'm hugely influenced by classical music. You know, I mean, that's a lot of what I listen to, and I think it's metal as fuck too, a lot of it, you know. Yeah, it's amazing what I can't imagine.
I forgot to ask, maybe this is out of sequence now, but at what point were you not just playing piano but like moving to a synthesizer?
Oh, yes. That would have been kind of in the metal days. It's funny, I bought my first keyboard there was this shop on 35. I don't remember what it was called. The building is still there. I'm sure it sells boats now or something, but I say it was called like Mike's Music or something. I don't know. It was off like 35 in Louisville. And yeah, I went in and bought a Roland keyboard from there with like all the money that I'd saved up. I must have been like 17. And I, you know, pretty much spent probably $1,000 at that time, you know, and bought a keyboard and to play in that metal band. And I still use that keyboard. It's a huge part of the Helium Queens.
Oh, cool.
I just, for some reason, there are sounds on it that I just love, and I have continued using it. But yeah, that's when I started. Of course, for me, it wasn't so much about synthesizers as it was finding sounds and using them. starting to like change sounds and really understand like keyboard synthesis on a basic level, that's a very ongoing thing and probably didn't happen until I'd say like maybe the last 6 years. I started moving into that realm, especially with Helium Queens. Like I wanted to get more into playing that, you know, kind of music myself, being able to use synthesizers and whatnot. And I mean, it is a whole world of just, I went to NAMM a couple years ago, and I remember like them saying that they were like, all of this, you know, like you stand up and you look at the vast expanse of booths and shit you find at NAMM, and they were like, it used to just be guitars. This is where all the guitar stuff was, and now it's all keyboards and synthesizers. Huh. And all the guitars are on the third floor or whatever, and you right. know, in the showrooms and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's huge. It's huge. It's an amazing thing. But yeah, that's kind of I would say the past 6 years. And yeah, it's ongoing, you know, and then learning to like fine tune that stuff and make sounds for like the bass. You know, in Prima Donna, I was the key bass player. That was like, you know, having to dial things in with just knobs and not just using patches, you know, not just finding a sound that's pre-programmed, but like dialing it in a specific way to make it sound like another synthesizer. That kind of stuff. And like I said, most of what I was doing before is just taking like a workstation, which is where you can put trumpets on these 5 notes and, you know, string pads in these 2 octaves, and then piano over here, and you can play multiple instruments at the same time and split your keyboard up in different ways. Mm-hmm. That's more of what I was doing, you know, before, in addition to what I would do with synthesizer. Yeah.
So, okay, you've already touched on a bunch of your bands. So let's start with the tributes. So, and actually you brought up something that I didn't even think to ask anybody else about this. I mean, I have had tribute people on, band members on, but it's just interesting. So yeah, so like your whole thing is like trying to like emulate these sounds for what you're doing in your role. That's obvious, but yet it's not.
Yeah, it's the production factor, and it can be a little bit tedious and cumbersome, and sometimes I don't want to do it. A lot of bands, especially in the tribute scene, they'll play with tracks. Mm-hmm. So that really? Stuff is all in a track. Yeah, I mean. Oh,
like just, I see what you're saying.
So like, yeah, so, you know, the little triangle parts, or the, you know, the string pads that you might not even notice are there when you're listening to the song. Mm-hmm. They'll put those in tracks.
Sure.
And I, for the most part, you know, when I was in the Madonna tribute, you know, with Bobby Hoke, you know, he really digs into that stuff and finds those parts. And, you know, we're similar in that regard of like, you know, I knew how to do that. And mm-hmm. so, you know, we would find those parts and do that. And that's kind of what I do I play in a Smith's Morrissey tribute, and people are like, there's no keyboards in that. And it's like, actually there's a lot of like weird piano. Sometimes there's actually like piano songs.
Sure, yeah.
And
God, I love the Smiths, and that's like one band I wish would come around, which will never happen.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, just not.
Which is a good reason. Like sometimes why are you being a tribute band for this band? Well, it's like, for that band, it's like, as you can't see me, if Morrissey gets a show, he's going to cancel it anyway.
Right?
So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's, yeah, and like I think the other good thing about like a Smiths Morrissey tribute, or just a Smiths tribute, whatever, is like the fan base is like has like a certain level of like camaraderie almost that you would find in like the goth scene, mm-hmm. or like these different scenes where it's like the Madonna, we had amazing fans that were Madonna fans and also our fans, but like it wasn't like the Smiths like felt like all those people felt like they were in a club together. Like, we love the Smiths Club, and it's always really cool because they really love.
I've got to
the
come out,
Smiths.
and as much as I love them, I haven't made it yet. But it's on the list.
It's fun. It's it's great.
So you're still in that one. You're not in the Madonna anymore.
Yeah, the Madonna has like just, I don't know. I think there comes a time when there is like unspoken burnout.
Yeah, sure.
And things come to a head, and it's kind of like, for me, I'm not going to speak for anybody else. I was just like, I'm okay with just not for
right
in an indefinite amount of time.
Sure.
You know?
Okay. And then George Strait, is that still one?
Yeah, I love playing country piano so much.
It's a lot different, huh?
It is, and it's super fun. And I find it, to be pretty accessible and like pocket focused. So it's like, anytime you're in a country band, you get to stand next to usually like the bass player and the drummer, and you kind of hold the rhythm section together.
Sure.
I love that, especially after playing synth bass for 6 years in the Madonna tribute. It's like that this is also probably out of order, is kind of a crazy thing too, because I grew up playing solo piano, like we talked about earlier, and never playing with anybody. And my timing, quite frankly, wasn't really great when I was playing in ensembles, because I wasn't really used to that. Sure. And I didn't have a lot of that experience, because I was also, homeschooled and just like literally didn't play with anybody. It wasn't like, oh, I play piano and I'm in band or choir. Like, I really just played by myself.
Sure. And
fortunately getting the experience of playing synth bass with an amazing drummer like Alan in Pre-Madonna, I was able to develop a pocket of playing. So I'd been in bands, for 4 or 5 years up to that point. Well, and I mean, before, for off and on. But when I started that's when I think it really sealed the deal on like my timing and my pocket and keeping like, a groove going and all that. And so when I, again, out of sequence, started Helium Queens, eventually I would, become not only the keyboard player, but also the synth bass player in that too. So yeah, it's wild how that experience really created like a whole musician out of me, to be able to, do the top end, but also do the bottom end.
Well, because, you get pushed. Like, when you're not doing your own thing and you're in another role and you're like, this is my job, I have to accomplish this. It's like it draws you out of your comfort zone and makes you, either you get better or you stop doing it, I guess.
Right? Exactly.
Okay, I got to ask, Spaghetti Eddie, what was that situation?
So Confetti Eddie. It's okay, because he would do tricks with Spaghetti, and so there was definitely some Spaghetti Eddie moments.
Okay.
So I was playing at a bar called the Underpass, which was under the highway off of, what is that street? Exposition, maybe, or First? I don't know, somewhere over there in Expo Park. And there was nobody there. It was the 3rd of July, probably. Everybody was watching fireworks and doing fireworks stuff. And I had like a Barry sax player, tuba, violin. I was on keyboards. Like, we were literally just being wild, and like they were like marching around the place. And we played a gig. Me and my drummer Danielle had just played a gig with Charlie Crockett, so we were part of his backing band.
Question: You were playing with Charlie for a while?
Really random. Yeah, just one. It was a one-off where we just sat in and played, and yeah, wild. A wild missed opportunity, I guess, maybe looking back. But I'm glad that we had the one night. Anyway, so we just played that gig at Sons of Herman Hall with Charlie Crockett. And then we me and Chelsea drove over to the underpass and set up and played there with, you know, Jeff Murder on tuba and Chris Evans on Barry sax and Charlotte Franklin on violin. I was playing keys and stuff. And in walks one lone person. I'm pretty sure like in a suit, like in a tuxedo situation, maybe in the middle of July. And that was Confetti Eddie. And he said, I think I have a gig for you. And across the street from there, he gave me his card. He was like, come over sometime. And I remember walking in, and it was that building a few doors down from 10 Bells or 8 Bells, whatever, whichever one is on.
Yeah, I don't remember.
In Expo Park.
Right.
I know the other one is was somewhere else in Dallas. Anyway, so in Oak Cliff, I think. But I walked in. It had a big Tyrannosaurus Rex outside of it, like a big sculpture that was there for years. And I walked in, and he was playing. The door was open, and like I heard like this like sewing machine, and there's just like mannequins and like weird shit everywhere, and I was like, what the fuck am I getting into? And he was there, and I turned this corner and went through like, I mean, just all sorts of stuff hanging and beautiful weird things everywhere, and he was making his own costumes and, you know, tricks and stuff. And yeah, I started playing piano for him and kind of music directing his magic show. And sometimes it would just be me and him, and he would do the whole magic show, and I would play piano for him for his acts and improv stuff, and then do a few numbers. And or he'd have a burlesque dancer, and I'd either play for her or, you know, run a track or whatever. And that went on for years. We had some really big shows, some really big, beautiful, you know, the Naughty Magic show was an amazing show. It was a big deal. It was a lot of work, but it was fun.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, we might as well beat around the Helium Queen bush. So like, how did that start? Why did that start?
Yeah. So, I had been playing shows with Chelsea and Charla, and my tuba player moved away, and we replaced him with Jesse Thompson, who was playing upright bass. But we got called to do this gig, and it was like an all women's pagan festival, and it was outside of Kansas City, at this, I think, a private piece of property that's pretty big, and you know, what you would think of when you go into a pagan festival, just like trees and pathways and running water and, you know, pretty wild stuff. So it was just the three of us, and it was a full moon, and there was all sorts of rituals happening. I mean, it was pretty wild. And, you know, being the musicians, like, we got to observe a lot, and, you know, kind of, and that would have been my band. We were just playing stuff. And then I think over a few weeks leading up to that, I had talked to Charla about really wanting to do some like electronic kind of stuff and have her play violin and do that upstairs at Crown and Harp, in that carpeted room upstairs. Like, I was like, I want to do something up there. That room is so weird and cool, and like, it's like a fucking weird dance party in the living room that's not yours. Like, I want to play there. And then the trip that we ended up taking kind of sealed the deal, where I was like, oh, we're gonna make a band, and we're gonna be from the future, and we're gonna be prophetesses from the moon, and that's what it's gonna be. And that was like after that trip, because we were just laying out there under the full moon, and I'm sure everybody was tripping, and it was crazy. And yeah, I just kind of felt like this pretty clear directive on that, and so we started that, and slowly over time developed these personas. And, you know, I was really into like transcendental meditation, and was like doing a lot of meditation and like doing writings like kind of around this storyline and stuff like that. And just trying to understand, and spent a lot of time like working on the background of it, and eventually turning it into an entire saga series, and what would become the opera. And it's really creating kind of like a universe for a thing, so that no medium is off limits as far as what we or someone could do to create within that framework. And let it be ongoing, developing, open-ended. It's really interesting because it continues to like evolve, and
you have shows, albums.
Yeah, so we have a 3-piece, like I said, Chelsea and Charla and I, and we kind of become the Helium Queens and channel them, and vice versa, and smoke the helium hookah on the stage, and have live performances throughout the year. And we actually just did our first tour in May, and it was amazing. I mean, it's a whole spectacle, I mean, it's all colorful, and it's pretty wild. I think what we can do is a 3-piece, and we can fit everything into one car. So neat.
Very easy to tour with.
Yeah. So we do have 2 albums. One was live recordings that we did kind of during COVID, and then one is a studio album we recorded at Civil Audio with Michael Briggs, and it's self-titled Helium Queens. And we have a new single that we recorded, and are recording some more stuff that's really amazing. I'll send you a copy of it so you can listen to it. I don't know when that's going to be out, but soonish. I am not actively looking, although I should be, for somebody to do a music video for it, because that's hands have been raised. That's all I needed to say. But yeah, just very working kind of like in a I think in a bigger sound direction. So, and then also besides the 3-piece, I had applied for a grant from the city of Dallas to fund a science fiction opera known as a space opera. And Chelsea and Charla and I basically sat at Chelsea's house for 2 weeks and came up with 25 pieces of music. Wow. Some recycled, some recycled things. Some things, of course, we jammed on before, but I mean, we spent 3 weeks cutting demos to make this music for this opera, because in 2020 they awarded us the grant to make the opera. And then COVID happened and they were like, JK. And then all of a sudden they were like, okay, you can do it, and you only have this amount of time to do it.
Oh, wow.
So or you can pass it up. And I was really close to passing it up, and then we decided to go for it, and we sat in that house and wrote music and script. And I mean, the script changed. It's still kind of, it changed until the last show, a little bit here and there, but the music was all pre-recorded so that we could basically sing and act. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that was a 20-person production. And then we did it again the following year in 2022 at the Kessler, in the round. So it felt like we were in a fucking wrestling rink. It was, people just cheering and watching from above and all
That's
around
cool,
while
yeah.
we were doing this thing. And it was awesome. And then I remember Tim DeLauder from the Spree was up on because the stage became seating, and he was sitting in the back row next to Chris Penn, and there was a projection of all of the words were projected on the screen so that you could follow along with the storyline as best as you could. And their faces were just bright because they were right on that line. And I remember Tim being like, yeah, I felt like I was being interrogated the whole time. But yeah, we did that. And then we're in talks with a nonprofit to do it in Denton next summer. So fingers crossed we'll be able to do another run of it.
Excellent. Yeah, I hope so. Because I remember thinking I was going to go for both those shows, and then something came up. And then the segue is perfect because Tim DeLauder was at that show, and that's what led you to Polyphonic Spree, right? Being a member of that.
Yeah. So, Polyphonic Spree happened. I've known Nick Earl for a long time. At that point, we used to go see, they had a jazz trio. I can't remember who. It was Nick Earl and Chris Holmes, who's a beloved drummer friend of mine, an incredible musician, and they would play jazz versions of whatever you could think of, like Tetris theme song to Nirvana and it was just wild. Wow. They were amazing, and they would do that at like the Bottle Shop on Greenville Avenue or wherever, and I would go with my best friend Betty Lee, and we would go listen to them. So I'd known Nick for a long time, and I kind of got word that Bach was retiring to go pursue other endeavors, and so I worked up some audition material and happened to run into Tim at the 30-year or something reunion of the KDGE 94.5 The Edge anniversary at Lee Harvey's, and he was presenting some stuff, and the Smiths tribute was playing, and so I kind of somehow managed to pull him aside, which is very difficult to do because everybody's, hey Tim, hey Tim, hey Tim, hey Tim, you know, just like cock blocking you the whole way. And you're like, come on, sorry, I don't know what the language
you're fine
is requirement is, but we finally had this conversation, like literally like behind a tree so that no one would see us, and he was like, you know how to play these songs? I was like, yeah. He's like, send them over. And so I sent him copies, and then played the whole, that must have been like August, September, and then worked really, really, really hard to get all of the rep done for the Christmas show. And after that, he sent me a text message like, great audition, you're in. And I was like, wow, oh, that was just an audition this whole time. Okay, got it. It was awesome. And, and then COVID hit, and that was pretty devastating for, us. And I think I'd played as many shows as recorded albums. In the first year I'd played the Christmas show, and then we recorded the Covers tribute album at the Polyphonic Spree house up the street from here, Afflatus, and then played one more show, and then started working on the new album Salvage Enterprise. And so recorded 2 albums in the span of like maybe 2 or 3 shows.
Wow.
Over 2 years. So it was pretty wild. But yeah, it's good to be, playing and have people at shows. And
I got to say, that was one of the most fun shows ever shot. I mean, that was
the other night.
Yeah, there's
at Longhorn.
So much going on, and the energy and the fans of that band are just amazing. And I mean, the ripples of the fan clubs on Facebook have continued to be really amazing fans, and it's cool. It's special for sure. It's unique.
Yeah.
It
was awesome. It was awesome. It was a great venue.
Yeah. Love the Longhorn.
Gonna have to go out there and take a bunch of pictures of just how it is right now, because it's not going to be like that in a year or 6 months. It's not going to be that desolate, arid waste.
Right.
Not waste, just like wasted away.
It's not built up. It's going to start, things are going to appear around it, for
and
sure.
It's pretty amazing right now. I mean, it's like being on a abandoned ghost town in the middle of Dallas. It's really wild.
It is wild. It's not that far though, really. It just seems like it's like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's on a little island. There's a name for it. Is it called Rock Island or something like that? I think I made that up actually, because I was talking to one of the Pearl Earl musicians about Rockaway Island or whatever. Anyway, it's surrounded by water. Actually, there's like one road that goes in, and then the rest of it's surrounded by water. And So it's just kind of cut off from everything. And
I mean,
weird.
I just think it's so cool though. I mean, like, I
It's
can't
so
imagine
cool.
getting to play there. Like the fact that it's open, and it's not just reopen. It's like they're really respecting and honoring the history and continuing to add to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's awesome.
What is next for you? Where can we find you? What's your next projects you're doing? I think I saw you have a Patreon going. Is that still happening?
I do. I have a couple Patreons. Helium Queens has a Patreon, and then I have my own Patreon. I share a lot of like real personal stuff, like raw kind of poetry and improvisations, and like what I call like first listens. Like if I get a song idea, I sit at the piano, I play it, I sing it, some words like maybe horribly out of key, doesn't matter. I kind of throw that stuff up on the Patreon because it's just kind of an archive. You know, it's an interesting question at this point because I used to know exactly what I was doing for the next 6 months and was really in denial about it. And I was like, I don't know, I have a lot of gigs. That's all I'm doing. But now some things have changed and there's fewer, things have changed. So I get to kind of answer that question differently. I did an interview with Joshua Ray Walker the other day, and because I started writing for The Observer.
I did see that,
and it's like that. I can't tell you how much like I've always wanted to be a professional writer, not necessarily like journalist articles,
right?
But like writing novels, and I've been a songwriter, but like I want to be like a writer, and I just. I was talking to Eva Raggio from The Observer. She was like, look, man, if you want to do it, do it. Just do it. Just give me this. Here's an assignment. Do it. And I did it. And I was like, I am totally obsessed with this. Like, just the research that it takes. Like, I'm sure some people can make a list of the top 10 best cigarette machines in bars in Dallas off the top of their head and write that in like a couple hours. But for me, I'm like, going to these places and doing all this research and like learning about all this stuff and talking to people, and like that's what I love about it. And so I did that interview. That was just like yesterday, maybe. I don't know, time is weird. And I was like really got that itch to sit. I hate that phrase. Gross. I really got the desire to kind of return to my own songwriting and maybe work on actually putting an album together of all these songs that I've written that I've kind of started to hoard and keep to myself or just for my Patreon, and really stop performing publicly because it was just like so vulnerable and like heavy for me. But I've kind of, I think, am in a place where I can do that again because my energy isn't just like being constantly put into other bands that aren't performing anymore. So I have a little bit more, hopefully a little bit more room with that. Helium Queens is doing some recording and is going to be doing some live shows and hopefully an opera next year. The Spree is doing a show at fucking Rubber Gloves in Denton.
What?
It hasn't even been announced yet. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this, but I got an email this morning saying it was confirmed.
Whoa.
So if I'm just like blowing the cover off this thing,
I guess you'll message me and tell me to take it off.
Yeah, I'll tell you to take it off. Actually, I might not unless somebody says something. October 1st at Polycon.
Wow.
They have a Polaroid festival there, and we're playing, I think it's Sunday, October 1st.
Wow.
And I'm super excited because
You heard it here first, people.
Yeah, because I love Rubber Gloves so much. I love Chad Withers over there, and Daniel Rodriguez runs the Polycon, and yeah, so I'm very excited about that. In addition to a couple shows that we have in the winter in December, of course, 2 nights of the Polyphonic Spree Christmas Extravaganza. This year is 2 nights, so that's exciting.
At Kessler again, or
the Majestic.
Oh, Majestic.
That's at the Majestic.
Oh, that's a cool spot.
Yeah, really cool.
And you get to play in some really cool venues with that band. Jeez,
I know, and really cool shows. That's a whole other podcast episode. But yeah, really, really some great stuff, and I'm sure some more as this new album is, I guess, getting ready to be released. That I can't tell you much about. I just know the last show we played was really interesting because we did 5 songs off the new album, and like those were songs that like I had written parts for and played on the album and was part of the recording process for all that. And so that was really special because I felt like I wasn't having to learn somebody else's stuff, like it was just like mine and playing that, and all of us playing that together.
Yeah. And I mean, not that you were ever a hired gun, but it just really probably makes you feel like you're really part of the team at that point more so.
Yeah. And that wasn't a thing. I wasn't expecting that feeling to really happen because I did feel like I was part of the team, but something really changed, I think, with that.
Well, that's the highest compliment that someone like Tim Lauder could give you is like, write your own parts in these songs and let's write together. That's like, I mean, how much better does it get than that?
It's cool. I have one part on a song. The song's called Shadows on the Hillside, and it's like a little piano part that you hear in the slow verses of the song, and he calls it the Steven Spielberg part, and I love that, because whenever you see somebody kind of light up about what you're doing,
sure,
and he lights up, when he hears something, it's like music does that for him, or any like things do that for him, so he's really expressive and has that big reactions, and is sensitive and can feel a lot of things, and that's, I think, part of what makes him who he is and as effective as he is. And so to have that experience is it's fucking cool, and I'm looking forward to whatever happens with that album and the shows that we play around it. And all I know is October 1st though.
I think you belong in that band. I think it was not an accident that you're there, and it was awesome seeing it, and it was awesome having you here today on Dallas Famous. We look forward to all of that stuff coming out.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I'd like to thank my guest, Poppy Xander. Theme song is Salim Narala with Unstoppable. We love that guy. You can listen to the Dallas Famous podcast every week on Deep Ellum Radio, Sundays and Tuesdays at 1 p.m., and then again on all the podcast places. Just wanted to say, if you're a DFW-based business and you want to do some sort of sponsorship, we're looking for you. So reach out and let's talk. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.